Welcome to the Expired Show, where we discuss everything that's expired. My name is Bella Bellagio,
I'm Lizzie Smalls.
And I'm Dante Abayo.
and today we will be discussing some interesting people, amongst them Lizzie Borden,
Oh, that's right.
and Dante's going to start us off
Mm-hmm.
with his guy, and then Lizzie's going to follow with all the cool Lizzie Borden factoids you probably did not know about. Because I know I did not know a lot about a lot of them. I thought I knew everything about Lizzie Borden, but no, I did not. So I think a lot of people are going to be surprised.
Yes.
Okay, Dante, who do you have?
Okay, I have Dennis Nilsen. Nilsen. He was a Scottish serial killer and necrophile. And those who don't know what that is, you can Google that. I'm not going to explain it. Who murdered at least 12 young men and boys during 1978 1983. Now, Dennis Andrew Nilsen was born on the 23rd of November 1945 in Fraserburgh, Aberdeenshire, was second of three children born to Elizabeth Duche White and Olav Magnus Morshan, who adopted the son Niels. His father was a Norwegian soldier who had travelled to Scotland in 1940 as part of the Free Norwegian Forces following the German occupation of Norway. After a brief courtship, he married White in May 1942, and the newlyweds moved into their parents' residence. The marriage between Nilsen's parents was difficult. His father did not view married life with any seriousness, became preoccupied with his duties with Free Norwegian Forces, and making little attempt to spend much time or find a new home with his wife. After the birth of their third child, Nilsen's mother concluded she had rushed into marriage without thinking. The couple were divorced in 1948. Their three other children, Olav Jr., Dennis, and Sylvia, were conceived on their father's brief visits to their mother's household. Now, Nilsen was a quiet yet adventurous child. His early memories
Wait, you're
were
saying first you're talking about the father. You're saying that the father didn't take marriage life seriously.
no, he didn't.
So what does that have to do with Nielsen?
That's to do with a little bit with the backstory of his parents.
Okay.
Now, Nelson was a quiet yet adventurous child. His early memories were that of family picnics in the Scottish countryside with his mother and his siblings, of his grandparents' pious lifestyle, which he later described as cold and pure, and of being taken on long country walks carried on the shoulders of his maternal grandfather, to whom he was particularly close. Now, despite being only 5 years old, Nielsen vividly recalled these walks as being very long along the harbour, across wide stretches of beach up to the sand dunes, which rise 30 feet behind the beach and Inverlochie. He later described this stage of his childhood as one of contentment, and his grandfather being a great hero and protector, adding that whether his grandfather, who was a fisherman, was at sea, life would be empty for me until he returned. Now, fortunately, his grandfather's health started to decline in 1951, and he died of a heart attack at the age of 62 while fishing on the North Sea.
Wow.
His body was brought ashore and returned to the White family home prior to burial, in what Nilsen describes later as his most vivid childhood recollection. His mother weeping, asking him whether he wanted to see his grandfather. He replied that he did. He was taken into a room where the grandfather lay in an open coffin. As Nilsen gazed upon the body, his mother told him his grandfather was sleeping, adding that he had gone to a better place. In years following the death of his grandfather, Nilsen became quiet and withdrawn, often standing alone on the harbour watching the herring boats. Home, he seldom participated in family activities and retreated from many attempts by adult family members to demonstrate affection towards him. Nilsen grew to resent what he saw as an unfair amount of attention his mother, grandfather, and later stepfather displayed upon his late older brother and younger sister. Nilsen envied Olav Jr.'s popularity. He often talked about playing games with his younger sister, Sylvia, to whom he was closer to than any other family member following his grandfather's death. Now, on one of the solo excursions to the beach in Iveraloch in 1954 or 1955, Nilsen became submerged beneath the water and was almost dragged out to sea. He initially panicked, flailing his arms and shouting. As he gasped for air, which wasn't there, he recalled believing that his grandfather was about to arrive and pull him out before experiencing a sense of tranquility. His life was saved by another youth who dragged him ashore. Shortly after this incident, Nelson's mother moved out of his grandfather's home and into a flat with three children. She later married a builder named Andrew Stott, who, with whom he had four more children in as many years. Although Nielsen initially resented
With
his
whom what she had
stepfather.
4 more children, you mean? The mother?
Yes, yes, that's right.
Okay, because I heard you say he had 4 more children. So it was actually the mother now has 8 kids.
Yes,
Okay.
whom he viewed as an unfair disciplinarian, gradually gained grudging respect for him. Now, Nielsen briefly had some time in the army in 1961. Joined the Army Catering Corps in the Omar Barracks in Aldershot in New Hampshire, Hampshire, not in Hampshire. Within weeks, Nelson began to excel in his army duties. Now, Nelson left in order to be able to train to be a police officer. So he moved to London in December of that year to begin a training. Now, in April 1973, Nelson completed his police training and was posted to Wilston Green as a junior constable. He performed several arrests, but he never had physically subdued a member of the public. Nelson enjoyed the work and missed the camaraderie of the army. He began to drink alone in the evenings. During the summer and autumn of 1973, Nelson began to frequent pubs and engaged in several casual liaisons with men. He never actually. He
He
viewed these
engaged in
encounters.
liaisons with men, so he was homosexual.
Um, yeah, that's a bit of a grey area.
Well,
He
it's not
viewed
really
these
gray if
encounters
he's.
as soul-destroying liaisons, which he would later lend his partner body in a vain search of inner peace. Now, here's where we get to the thing. Between 1978 and 1983, Nilsen was known to have killed an unalive a minimum of 12 men and boys, and has attempted to kill 7 others. He initially confessed in 1983 to having unalived 16 victims. The majority of Nilsen's victims were homeless or gay men. Others were heterosexual people that he met in bars, on public transport, and on one occasion outside his own home. All of Nilsen's murders were committed inside his 2 North London addresses, which he resided in years. He is known to have killed. Victims were lowered in addresses through guile, typically from the offer of alcohol or shelter. Inside Nelson's home, the victims were usually given food and alcohol, drugs, then strangled, typically with a ligature, either to death or until they become unconscious. If the victim had
Um,
been strangled unconscious, Nilsen would have drowned him in the bathtub, sink, or a bucket of water before
what?
observing a ritual in which he bathed, clothed, and retained the bodies inside his residence for several weeks or occasionally months before he dismembered them. Each victim that was unalive was between 1978 and 1981 at his Cricklewood residence.
Wait, he
Was
had them in his house that long for a while?
yeah yeah
Oh, okay.
at his Cricklewood residence was disposed by either burning upon a bonfire or prior to the section, Nilsen removed their internal organs, which he disposed either the other side of the fence behind his flat. Talk about
Ugh.
that. Did he actually want to be caught? I mean, getting rid of evidence behind a fence. I mean, wasn't there any other way he could have done that?
Yeah, not
His
very bright.
victims were killed in 1982 and 1983 at his Muswell residence, were retained in his flat with their flesh and smaller bones flushed down the lavatory.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Nilsen admitted to engaging in solo acts as he viewed the nude bodies of several of his victims and to have performed intercurial sex upon 6 of his victims' bodies, but was adamant that he never actually penetrated any of his victims.
Ugh.
Now, yeah. Nilsen's first victim was 14-year-old Stephen Holmes on the 30th of December 1978. Holmes encountered Nilsen in the Cricklewood Arms pub, where Holmes was unsuccessfully attempting to purchase alcohol in the pub. According to Nilsen, he had been drinking heavily alone on the day he met Holmes, before deciding in the evening that he must, at all costs, leave his flat and seek company. Nilsen invited Holmes to his house with the promise of the two drinking alcohol and listening to music, believing him to be approximately 17 years old. At Nelson's house, both he and Holmes drank heavily until they fell asleep. The following morning, Nilsen awoke to find the sleeping Holmes beside him in his bed. In his subsequent subsequent
Subsequent.
thank you written confessions, Nilsen stated he was afraid to wake him in case he left. After caressing the sleeping youth, Nilsen decided Holmes was to stay with me over the new year whether he wanted to or not. Reaching for a necktie, Nilsen straddled Holmes as he strangled him into unconsciousness before drowning the teenager in a bucket full of water. Nilsen then washed the body in his bathtub before placing Holmes in his bed and caressing his body. He once did
Pretty gross.
sexual
Yeah.
solo act over the body while awaiting for the passing of rigor mortis to enable him to stow the corpse beneath the floorboards. Holmes' corpse remained beneath the floorboards for almost 8 months before Nilsen built a bonfire in the garden behind his flat
It
and
reminds me of
burned the body.
that Edgar Allan Poe story.
The Telltale Heart, yeah,
Yeah.
and burned the body on the 11th of August 1979. Nilsen said, I eased him into his new bed underneath the floorboard. A week later, I wondered whether the body had changed at all or had started to decompose. I dug him up and pulled the dirt-stained youth up from the floor. His skin was very dirty. I stripped him naked and carried him into the bathroom and washed the body. There was practically no discoloration and his skin was pale white. His limbs were more relaxed than when I put him down there. Reflecting on his killing spree in 1983, Nilsen stated, having killed Holmes, I caused dreams that caused death. This is my crime. Adding that he had started down the avenue of death and possession to a new kind of flat. In 1979, on the 11th of October, Nilsen attempted to murder a student from Hong Kong named Andrew Ho, whom he had met at St. Martin's Lane pub and lured him to his flat in promise of sex.
It's Andrew Ho a ho.
Nilsen attempted
Just
to
wondering.
strangle Ho, who managed to flee his flat and reported the incident to police. Nilsen was questioned in relation to the incident, but Ho decided not to press charges. 2 months after the attempted murder of Ho, on the 3rd of December 1979, Nilsen encountered a 23-year-old Canadian student by the name of Kenneth Ockerton, who had been on tour of England visiting relatives. Nilsen encountered Ockerton as they both drank at a West End pub. Upon learning the young man was a tourist, Nilsen offered to show Ockerton several London landmarks, an offer in which Ockerton accepted. Nilsen then invited the student to his house on a promise of a meal and further drinks. The pair stopped at an off-license en route to Nelson's residence and purchased whiskey, rum, and beer, with Ockerton insisting on sharing the bill. Nilsen was adamant he could not recall the precise moment he strangled Ockerton, but recalled that he strangled the young man with the cord of his headphones as Ockerton listened to music. He also recalled dragging Ockerton across his floor with the wire wrapped around his neck, strangled him, before pouring himself half a glass of rum and continued to listen to music on the headphones, which he had actually strangled Ockerton with. The following day, Nilsen purchased a Polaroid camera and photograph Ockerton's body with various suggestive positions. He then laid Ockerton's corpse spread eagled above him on his bed as he watched television for several hours before wrapping the body in plastic bags and stowing the corpse beneath floorboards. On approximately 4 occasions over the following fortnight, Nilsen brought up Ogden's body from beneath his floorboards and seated the body upon his armchair alongside him as he drank alcohol and watched television. Nelson unalived his third victim, 16-year-old Martin Duffy, on the 17th of May 1980. Duffy was a catering student in Birkenhead, Merseyside, who had hitchhiked to London without his parents' knowledge on the 13th of May, after being questioned by the British Transport Police for evading his train fare. For 4 days, Duffy had slept rough near Euston railway station before Nilsen encountered the youth as he returned from a union conference in Southport. Duffy, Nelson recollected, was both exhausted and hungry and happily accept Nelson's offer for a meal and a bed of that evening. After the youth had fallen asleep in Nelson's bed, Nelson fashioned a ligature around his neck, then simultaneously sat on Duffy's chest and tightened the ligature with great force. Nelson held his grip until Duffy became unconscious. He then dragged the youth into the kitchen and drowned him in the sink before bathing the body, which he recollected as being the youngest looking he had ever seen. Duffy's body was first placed
How old was he?
upon.
How old was he?
He was 23. Oh no, he was 16. 23 was. Yes, he was 16 years old.
Okay.
Duffy's body was first placed upon a kitchen chair and then upon the bed in which he had been strangled. The body was repeatedly kissed, complimented, and caressed by Nilsen, both before and after he did a solo sex act while sitting upon the stomach of the corpse. For 2 days, Duffy's body was stowed in a cupboard before Nilsen noticed signs of bloating. Therefore, he went straight under the floorboards. Following Duffy's murder, Nilsen began to kill with increasing frequency. Before the end of 1980, he had killed a further 5 victims and attempted to murder one other. Only one of his victims, whom Nilsen murdered, 26-year-old William Sutherland, had ever been identified. Nelson's recollections of the unidentified victims were vague, but he graphically recalled how each victim had been murdered, unalived, and just how long the body had been retained before dissection. One identified victim killed in November had moved his legs in a cycling motion as he was being strangled, likely due to this particular murder. Nilsen is known to have absented himself from work. Nilsen had unsuccessfully attempted to resuscitate before sinking to his knees and sobbing, and then spitting at his own image as he looked at himself in the mirror. On one occasion, he had the victim in bed along. That was.
Huh?
That paragraph is not well. It basically laid alongside the body of the unidentified victim as he listened to the classic scene, fanfare of a common man before bursting into tears. Inevitably, the accumulated bodies beneath Nielsen's floorboards attracted insects and created a foul odor, particularly throughout summer months. On the occasions
Oh.
when Nielsen
Yeah,
brought his
that doesn't
bodies
sound good.
Mm-mm.
from beneath the floorboards, he noticed that the bodies had been covered with pupae and infested with maggots. Some
Oh.
victims' heads had maggots crawling out of the eye sockets and the mouth. To kill
Uh,
the maggots, he sprinkled salt upon the bodies and then placed deodorants beneath the floorboards. He then sprayed insecticide about flat twice daily, but the odor of decay and presence of flies remained. So, how was he found out? So, Nielsen's bodies were first discovered by a Dino Rod employee named Michael Ketterin, who responded to the plumbing complaints made by both Nielsen and the other tenants of Cranley Garden. Upon opening a drain cover at the side of the house, Ketterin discovered the drain was packed with a gluttonous flesh-like substance and numerous small bones of unknown origin. Callan reported his suspicions to his advisor, Gary Wheeler. As Castan had arrived at the property at dusk, he and Wheeler agreed to postpone further investigation into the blockage until the following morning. Prior to leaving the property, Nielsen and fellow tenant Jim Alcott convened with Catan to discuss the source of the substance. Upon hearing Catan explain how similar the substance was in appearance to human flesh, Nielsen replied, "It looks to me like someone has been flushing down their Kentucky Fried Chicken." So, so later on in an interview conducted on the 10th of February, Nielsen confessed that there were further remains stowed in a tea chest in his living room, with other remains
Stored
inside an
where in
up
his living room?
a tea chest.
Tea
oh.
chest?
Hmm.
Oh, God, he had them everywhere.
With other remains inside an upturned drawer in his bedroom. The dismembered body parts were the bodies of the three men, all of whom he had unalived by strangulation, usually with a necktie. One victim he could not name, another he knew only as John the Guardsman, and the third he identified as Stephen Sinclair. He also stated that beginning of December 1978, he had unalived 12 to 13 men at his former address, 195 Melrose Avenue. Nilsen also admitted to having unsuccessfully attempted to unalive approximately 7 other people who had either escaped or on one occasion had been at the brink of death but had been revived and allowed to leave his residence.
So, what was the name of this guy again? His complete name?
It was Dennis Andrew Nilsen.
Okay.
So a further search of additional remains in Cranley Gardens on the 10th of February revealed the lower section of a torso and 2 legs stowed in a bag bathroom, skull section of torso, and various bones sea chest. The same day, Nilsen accompanied police to Melrose Avenue, where he indicated the 3 locations in the rear garden where he had burned the remains of his victims. So, under English law, the police had 48 hours in which to charge Nilsen or release him. Assembling the remains of the victims, unalived at Cranley Gardens, on the floor of Hornsley mortuary, Professor Bowen was able to confirm the fingerprints of one body matched those on the police files of Sinclair. At 5:40 p.m. on the 11th of February, Nelson was charged with murder, and a statement revealing this was released to the press. Formal questioning of Nilsen began the same evening, with Nilsen agreeing to be represented by a solicitor. Police interviewed Nilsen on 16 separate occasions over the following days in interviews that totaled over 30 hours. Nilsen was adamant that he was uncertain of why he had killed, simply saying, "I'm hoping you'll not make me tell them that.
What? What do you
I'm
say?
hoping you will tell me that."
I'm hoping you won't
When,
tell me that.
yes, when asked his motives for the murder, for the unlife.
Doesn't make sense. I'm hoping you don't tell me that.
Mm-hmm.
You mean you probably meant I'm hoping you don't ask me that?
Yes, yes. But his actual words were, "I hope you don't tell me."
Okay.
He was adamant that the decision to kill was not made until moments after the act of the unalivenment. Most victims had died by strangulation on several occasions. He had drowned the victims once he had strangled them into unconsciousness. One victim had been killed unalived. He typically bathed the victim's body, shaved any hair from the torso to confirm it to his physical ideal, then applied makeup to any obvious blemishes upon the skin. The body was usually dressed in socks and underpants before Nelson draped the victims around him as he talked to the corpse. With most
Oh,
victims, Nelson did
He
a
was
solo
talking to
sex
them
act.
like they were still alive.
Yes, he basically weekend at Bernie's. With most victims, Nelson did a solo. Nelson participated in a solo sex act that as he stood alongside or knelt beside the body. And Nelson confessed to having occasionally engaged in intercurral sex with his victim's body. Anyone
oh,
who doesn't understand that you can actually look that up on Google, because I cannot go into very much detail about that one. But repeatedly stressed to the investigators that he had never penetrated his victims, explaining that his victims were too perfect or beautiful for the pathetic ritual of commonplace.
Yeah, so he was a homosexual.
Mm-hmm. Hmm? What do you say?
I say, so he was a homosexual. He was sleeping with them before he started killing. And then after he killed them, then he was getting off on it and thinking they were too perfect and beautiful.
He was uh, he was, well, I suppose you could call him a homophobic gay. He didn't want to accept that he was, and so he was basically killing. He was basically unaliving gay people because it was trying to figure out his own demons, I suppose. Anyway, Nilsen was sentenced to life imprisonment on the 4th of November 1983, with a recommendation that serve a minimum of 25 years. This recommendation was later changed to a whole life tariff in December 1994. Uh,
Okay, so he's still in prison, or did he already pass away?
he died on the 10th of May 2018. Nilsen was taken to Her Majesty's Prison, Full Sutton, to York Hospital after complaining of severe stomach pains. He was found to have a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm, which was repaired, although he subsequently suffered a blood clot as a completion of surgery. Nelson died on the 12th of May, same year.
How old was
Basic,
he?
he was 72.
Okay, yay! That was Dennis. What's his name?
Dennis Nilsen.
Dennis Nilsen. I haven't heard of him before.
To think that he put them under the floorboards. That
Yeah,
is
that's
just
really
gross.
creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, yep, yep,
Hmm.
yep.
And his exploits were turned into a film in the 1980s called The Cold Light Day, and was later made into a TV series in during COVID. Well,
Mm.
came out on during COVID with David Tennant playing the titular character.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Okay. Well, now we're going to move on to Lizzie Borden. Lizzie has information on the other Lizzie.
yes, I do. So, in order to, what I did was I explained a little bit about Lizzie Borden's, a few of their family members to explain what's going to happen with Lizzie at trial. So, Eliza Borden was the wife of Lodwick Borden, who was Andrew Borden's cousin. Eliza's mental state, while psychosis is a modern clinical term, the people of 1848 used words like melancholy and religious mania. Based on historical accounts, there are several indicators of what today might be diagnosed as a severe postpartum psychosis or major depressive disorder. The religious trigger reports from the time suggest that Eliza had become increasingly obsessed with religious themes of saving her children from a sinful world. So, what
Hmm.
she had done in 1848, decades before the famous 1892 unaliving of the Borden family, but it was in the same town of Fall River. The morning of the attack, Christopher was 4. At the time, his mother led the children into the cellar. Um, he had, she had Maria, who was 2, and Eliza Ann, who was 7 months. She had unalived the 2 children, and by this time, the son Christopher ran and hid. She dropped her children in a large water tank in the basement, and
Basement.
then yes, and
This
then she
was
went
this
and
was Lizzie Borden's aunt.
uh, well, they're saying this was the at her father's cousin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So then
Mhm.
after she had unalived her children, she went into a separate room in the basement and unalived herself. So when the
Uh,
father came
Ah,
home, he found the son, and
see.
it and it had a lot of trauma on the son. So he was the one that found the family. Lodwick became the broken man, and Lodwick was the father of the children. He eventually remarried, but the stigma of the Borden Stella murders or unaliving followed him until his death. So he raised Christopher. Um, because of this, Christopher ended up becoming a seaman, a master mariner.
Oh,
He wanted to get away from the gossip and everything, and he thought this was a way
mm,
to. be free of everything that had happened to him.
Hmm.
So while Lizzie became a celebrity, Christopher was the quiet survivor of an equally horrific crime that the family just spent time trying to forget.
Yeah.
He he died at 81 years old though.
Oh,
And
he lived
then we
all day,
had
didn't
yeah, he
Did he ever
did.
get
And then
married? Does it say anything
no,
about his family? No.
no, he didn't get
He just
married.
he just lived his spent his life at sea.
Yeah. Yeah, to get
Oh,
away from everything.
yeah.
And then we have Alice Borden, who was a cousin of Lizzie's in 1878. She was home. She was found in her home. She took her own life as well, in this almost in the same eerie, reminiscent, violent way. So, and that was in 1878. She was described as having melancholy, which is severe depression. She used a razor. Um,
Oh,
the
shaving
outcome,
razor.
yeah. So, unlike Eliza, Alice initially survived the attempt because she was discovered in time for medical intervention. However, she remained in a fragile mental state, and she ended up dying.
Oh.
So, yeah. Then, so this would have to do. Now we're going to 1892. Andrew and Abby that were unalived with the hatchet. When Lizzie went to trial, the local gossip wasn't just about her, it was about the fact that every few decades, aborigines seemed to lose their mind and turn to sharp instruments. While not strange attempts were made, unaliving attempts, there were other
he?
several Borden relatives who ended up in the Taunton State Hospital, the local asylum. The
Oh, wow.
family was always extremely wealthy, but they couldn't hide the fact that several members suffered from nervous breakdowns
So they had like a
during.
history of mental illness in the
Right.
family.
Yes, yes. During Lizzie's trial, some people whispered about congenital insanity or a streak of madness that ran through the bloodline. Now, Andrew Borden was a wealthy, notoriously frugal property developer. His tight fisted nature and recent property transfers to his second wife were major sources of family friction. Sarah Borden, who was actually the children's Emma and Lizzie's actual mother, she died in 1863 when Lizzie was a toddler. Her death left
No.
a void that the daughters felt was never properly filled. And then, of course, Andrew marries Abby. Andrew married her 2 years after Sarah's death. Lizzie and her sister Emma famously referred to her as Mrs. Borden rather than mother, signaling a cold, transactional relationship.
Uh,
Abby was born in 1828, making her 64 years old at the time that she was unalive. She was considered a spinster when she married Andrew Borden in 1865 at the age of 37. She was quite short, around 5 foot, reportedly weighed over 200 pounds, and the
Oh.
yeah, in the sweltering August heat of 1892, this made her very uncomfortable, which is why she was very busy changing linens and cleaning the guest room to keep the house fresh, because she apparently had a bad odor to her.
Oh.
Uh, the,
ah,
the so yeah, the social gossip. Abby came from a
I know what they're like.
respectable but
Mhm.
not wealthy family. When she married Andrew, she significantly married up in terms of wealth, which reportedly sat poorly with Andrew's daughters Emma and Lizzie. Unlike the Borden sisters who were active in the church and social circles, Abby was known to be very private and somewhat of a homebody. The sisters never accepted Abby as their mother. The Mrs. Borden rule. For decades, the girls called her mother, but following a massive argument over property, Lizzie began calling her Mrs. Borden exclusively. Now, there's a property
Ah,
dispute. The real breaking point happened when Andrew bought a house for Abby's sister. Lizzie and Emma were furious, viewing this as Andrew giving away their future inheritance to
mm,
Abby's side of the family. They demanded and received a similar property in return, but the emotional damage was already done. Now, there was a poison fear. Interestingly, the day before the the Abby and Andrew were unalived, Abby went to see Dr. Bowen, the family physician. She was terrified that the family had been poisoned because they had all been violently ill. Dr. Bowen dismissed it as bad mutton, the infamous mutton stew that sat out in the heat. But Abby
Oh.
remained convinced someone was trying to kill them or unalive them. Now, Emma Borden was 9 years
Mm.
older than Lizzie. She acted as a maternal figure and was fiercely protective of Lizzie. Emma was out of town in Fairhaven during the unaliving. Emma Borden also never married and never had children. Her life was defined almost entirely by her role as a protector, and eventually she became a recluse. So when she
Oh.
was young, she vowed to take care of Lizzie and raise her, and that's what she did for her mother. Many
Oh,
people wonder if Emma ever had a deathbed confession, but she didn't. She died in New Hampshire in 1927, just 9 days after her sister Lizzie had.
mm.
So now we come to the domestic help, which is Bridget. When Bridget was hired,
Wait,
the
I have a
Borden sister,
question. Sorry.
yeah,
Did they say what Lizzie died from and how old she
um,
was?
yeah, that I'll get to that one. That's
Oh, okay.
farther. Yeah. Okay. Where did I go? Oh, there we go. So when Bridget was hired, the Borden sisters started calling her Maggie. This wasn't that they forgot her name. It was a common and quite derogatory habit among wealthy families of the era to call their Irish maids Maggie, regardless of their actual name. Bridget
Mm.
reportedly hated it, which adds to the theory that there were a lot of simmering resentment in the household.
Mm.
For those 3 years, Bridget lived in a tiny, unheated, finished room on the third floor, the attic level. While the rest of the family had larger rooms on the second floor, Bridget was tucked away at the very top. On the day of the unaliving incident, she had been out washing windows in the record breaking heat, which made her feel physically ill before she went up to that cramped room to lie down. Now we have the newcomer perspective. Because she had only been there for 3 years, she was still considered a newcomer compared to the decades of tension between the sisters and the stepmother.
So Lizzie called
Um,
her Maggie too?
she called her Bridget and she had called her Maggie. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Um, Despite the frugality of Andrew and the coldness of the daughters, Bridget stayed for 3 years because the Bordens were reliable employers who paid her wages on time. However, she famously gave her notice and left the family almost immediately after the trial ended, moving as far away as she could, first to the western U.S. and eventually back to Ireland. Now, months before the
Oh.
murders,
Mm.
there's the pigeon uh, massacre that happened. So the incident happened in May of
There
1892.
was a
Only a few
pigeon. There was a pigeon massacre.
massacre, yeah. Only a few months. You had mentioned it before. Only a few months before the unaliving, Lizzie was keeping a flock of pigeons in the barn behind their house.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
She was
Oh yeah. Yeah, I heard.
Yeah, she was deeply attached to them, seeing them as her pets and a rare source of joy. The conflict was Andrew claimed that local boys were breaking into the barn to try and catch the pigeons. Instead of fixing the barn or dealing with the boys, he took a more efficient and brutal approach. He took a hatchet, possibly the same one used in the unaliving, or a similar tool, and ended up ending the pigeon's life right in front of Lizzie,
Oh
or where
God.
he knew she would find them.
Oh. Oh, that's
Yeah,
sick.
that's messed up.
Now, the dinner rumor. The detail about them eating the pigeons for dinner is a point of heavy debate among historians. So the legend is that it's been retold that Andrew forced the family to eat the pets for dinner that night to not let the meat go to waste. But this is often cited as the moment Lizzie's resentment turned into a rage. The reality in
Mm.
testimonies, Andrew's farmhand mentioned that Andrew had unalived the pigeons because he was frustrated with the trespassers. While there's no definite historical record, confirming they were stirred for dinner. The act that Andrew used the hatchet to unalive something Lizzie loved is a confirmed and chilling precursor to what happened in August. The fact that Andrew used a hatchet to unalive the pigeons is a
Right.
detail that's not going to go unnoticed. If Lizzie was the one who did this, had this rage, she used the exact same method on him that he used on her pets.
See.
So interestingly, while Andrew used the pigeon thieves as an excuse to put extra locks on his doors and the barn, they created the very environment Bridget described on the morning of the unaliving, a house so tightly locked and bolted that it was difficult for even the family to move around easily. So now we
Hmm.
come to the Borden unaliving August 4th, 1892. Bridget said she was outside washing windows when Abby was unalived and resting in her room when Andrew was killed. She is the only other person confirmed to be in the house. So Abby was unalived upstairs in the guest room between 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. She was struck roughly 19 times with the hatchet. Abby's
Wow.
death was actually more brutal, suggesting more of a personal rage because the first swipe, they believe, when the hatchet hit her, it knocked half of her scalp off, and her long hair that was braided up, was on the other side of the room. And then
Uh,
the rest of them, yeah, got her.
that sounds awful.
Yes.
It sounds
Now,
like kind of like she was scalped, sort of.
kinda, yeah. So her body was found by the neighbor and the maid. Because of how she fell, she was wedged in a tight space, and blood spatter had already begun to congeal, which helped doctors prove she died before Andrew. Andrew was unalived while napping on the living room sofa around 11 a.m. He was struck 11 times. Police found a hatchet head in the basement, handleless and covered in ash, which they believe was the unaliving weapon used, though forensic testing at the time was primitive. And Andrew Borden's examination, unlike modern cases where the bodies are taken to a high tech morgue, the morgue for the Bordens was actually their dining room table. So each person was brought to the dining room table after they were looked at.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But with but
this.
Which was common back then.
they
That was common from back then for
Mm,
the dining room tables to be used to this for deceased bodies.
the first time that I heard the story about Lizzie Borden, it said that she was naked when she killed them. Is there any reference to that?
um
I think that's ridiculous.
Hmm.
I don't
there
think she
was
was.
talk of yeah, there was talk that she was at one point, but the stories kept changing from what people rumored happened to what possibly actually happened.
Hmm.
So one of the reasons they think this happened was rumors of secret relationships between Lizzie and Emma, which were sisters. Suspicions of an unnatural closeness between the sisters stemmed from their lifelong cohabitation and Emma's protectiveness of Lizzie. The other was Lizzie and Bridget. The theory suggests Lizzie and the maid were involved in an affair. Um, Although people argue this explains why Bridget never saw anything and why she reportedly left for Ireland shortly after the trial with a significant amount of money, which some claim was hush money provided by Lizzie. Now there was a supposed secret son, William Borden, and they use this in her trial as the wild card theory that Andrew Borden had an illegitimate, mentally unstable son named William, who was born from a secret affair during his marriage to his first wife, Sarah. The theory
Right.
identifies his mother as Phoebe Hathaway. The Hathaways were a local family, and um, he provided her hush money, hoping that she would actually end the pregnancy, and she never did.
I see.
But there's little evidence. They say William was born in 1851. This would have made him 41 years old at the time of the unaliving in 1892. Um, but he died
How
in
old was Lizzie? I'm sorry. Well, how old was Lizzie at the time? She was in her 30s,
he,
I think.
yeah, he was about 9 years older than Lizzie.
Oh, okay. Like about the age of her older sister.
Yeah, yeah. So the conspiracy theorists point, uh, oh, William, he reportedly also unalived himself by doing this in a farmhouse.
Oh,
All
his
right.
own
Right.
farmhouse?
It doesn't say if it's his farmhouse. It wasn't very clear on.
How long was it after the Lizzie Borden trial? After her parents were unalived that William unalived himself. Does it say?
Well, that was 1842 the family unaliving happened. He did this in 1901 to himself.
Oh, okay.
The other thing was there's three biggest holes in the testimony from the court hearing. There was the open window problem. Bridget claimed she was outside washing windows when Abby, the stepmother, was unalived upstairs. However, it was an incredibly hot August day. To wash windows properly, she would have been moving around the perimeter of the house. The suspicion was Abby was unalived in the guest room, which had windows facing the side of the house. If Bridget was outside, she was potentially just feet away from where the struggle happened.
Yeah.
So why didn't she hear or see anything?
See, exactly.
Mm.
The napping story. When Andrew was unalived in the living room, Bridget said she had finished her chores and went up to her third floor room to take a nap because she was feeling ill from the heat.
Mm.
But the suspicion was Andrew was unalived just after 11 in a house with thin Victorian floors and no insulation. The sound of a hatchet striking a skull and the weight of a body hitting a sofa would likely carry. Bridget claimed she heard nothing until Lizzie shouted for her to come downstairs. The laughter on the
Right.
stairs. One of the most chilling parts of Bridget's testimony was that while she was struggling with the front door lock to let Mr. Borden in earlier that morning, she heard Lizzie laughing from the top of the stairs. Now, the twist is from the top of those stairs, Lizzie would have had a direct line of sight into the guest room where Abby's body was already lying. If Bridget heard Lizzie laugh, she was standing right there. Yet Bridget didn't find it odd enough to investigate or look around. Many people agree it's physically unlikely she heard or saw anything. So this leads to other main theories of hush money that she helped Lizzie clean up and Lizzie gave her hush money. If Bridget did see something, she might have been
Oh.
terrified to speak up that she'd be the next target, or framed for a crime herself as a poor immigrant in a wealthy household. This
Mm-hmm.
also led to a serial killer on the loose. Case in point, the defense and public pointed to several other incidents to suggest a serial killer or prowler was responsible. The farmhand theory. There were reports of a strange man seen near the boarding property that morning. The Jose Correro case. Just months before the Borden trial in 1893, a man named Jose Carrera killed two women with an axe in a nearby Somerset, Massachusetts home. The argument that a violent predator was active in the region. The Bertha Manchester murder in 1893. While Lizzie was awaiting trial, a young woman named Bertha, who was 22, was hacked to death with an axe in her kitchen in Fall River, and the weapon was found lying in the woodpile. An autopsy revealed
Mm.
23 distinct and separate axe wounds on the back of the skull and its base. Defensive wounds and ripped clothing suggest that she had put up a fierce struggle with her assailant before being overpowered. This initially cast massive doubt on Lizzie's guilt, as she was in jail at the time. However, a man named Jose Carrillo was later convicted for that specific crime. And sadly, the police stopped looking for these other people that were doing all these other unaliving incidents because they wanted the prominent, wealthy family to stay front and center of everything.
Yeah.
Also, the weird twist about this is Uncle John Morse came. So on the morning of the unaliving, John Morse was their mother's brother. Um, he came to visit about 8:45 um, to town. His alibi was almost too perfect. He claimed that while he was in a streetcar, he memorized the identification numbers of the conductors' badges, which had nothing to do with what had happened in the house, but he was remembering everything else. The suspicion is critics and police found it highly unusual that a man would proactively memorize badge numbers unless he knew he would need to prove exactly where he was at any specific minute.
Yeah.
John
It's kind of
Mm.
was
weird.
questioned. Yeah, he was questioned and was actually taken into custody shortly after. The other weird thing was he was found in the backyard eating pears from a tree. And he was calm as could be when the police said, "Do you know why we're here?" He said yes, but he remained calm during this whole
Mhm.
thing. He
So he said yes, he knew why they were there, and he
Yeah,
just kept eating pears.
he kept eating pears from the pear tree in the backyard.
So then that means he had something to do with it if he knew why they were there. Well, most
You would.
likely.
hmm He died on March 1st, which was exactly the 79th birthday of Emma Borden, which was it. For them, it was weird. It started to seem that everybody started to pass away near each, like their death date was almost the same. So Lizzie changed her name to Lizbeth after
Mm.
the incident, after she was let go and she moved. She died on
Mhm.
June 1st, 1927. Her funeral was the polar opposite of her trial. It was a private affair. Her will explicitly requested a strictly private funeral. The attendance, there were no crowds, no reporters, no mourning townspeople, only a handful of people attended, mostly her household staff, who remained incredibly loyal, and a few representatives from the Animal Rescue League, which Lizzie was part of the
Oh,
ASPCA back then.
oh, I'm
She
part
was
of the
buried at,
ASPCA too.
yeah,
Mm.
she was buried at night or early in the morning to avoid any public spectacle. Now,
Mhm.
Lizzie, Andrew, Abby, and Emma are all buried in all together. And remember the young boy Christopher from earlier? He's
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
buried there.
Is that?
He's
Do they
off.
have like a mausoleum?
No, they each have
No.
headstones.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Oh.
So, and I
Oh.
I tried to find out, is there any further family curse or whatever they want to call it. So they're saying the Bordens have lived their lives without incident, but in Fall Ribbon, the curse is very much alive as a cultural phenomenon because
Mhm.
the town was defined by their murders. So every year on August 4th, people gather to reenact crimes. In that sense, the curse is that the family can never be forgotten or allowed to rest in peace.
Oh, that's terrible. I feel bad because I don't think she was guilty. I don't know. People may disagree with me, but I feel like she wasn't the one that did it. I think some a guy did it because of the amount of times that the axe struck her father and stepmother. I just don't know if a petite female would have that much strength to whack an
Right,
axe on the back of someone's head, which is super
Mm.
hard, the skull, so many
Mm.
times without getting exhausted. Like having that much energy to do that.
Mhm.
right. Yeah, I don't think so either. Mm-mm, not at all.
I think maybe the maid wasn't in Bridget.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe the maid was upset by the way they were treating her and didn't like it. And because supposedly wasn't there something about that Mr. Borden was having relations with the maid?
Yes, yes,
against her will.
yeah. I heard about that. Well,
So I think she
Yeah.
probably had some guy show up at the house. She let him in, and he went in and alived the people, and then left.
I also think the uncle too may have had a part in it because he also wanted to be part of Andrew's wealth and company. And after his first wife Sarah passed away, he
Yeah,
kind of pushed her family to the side. So for him to
yeah,
show up and just be eating
that's
pears
true.
and
Yeah,
that would be a motive. Yeah,
yeah,
on the morning of, especially of what had happened.
yeah. Then he probably did it.
Hmm.
That's a little too much of a coincidence. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just don't think Lizzie did it. I don't feel like she was the one that did it. Like I don't know for sure who did it, but I just feel like it wasn't her. It was someone else.
Right.
Because I just feel like they have the strength to, and I'm not trying to say like, oh, women are weaker than men, but come on, a petite woman and a big strong guy, they're gonna be able to use an axe differently. I'm super
Right.
wimpy. I know I do one swing and be like, oh, that's enough. I broke a nail. I can't go
Hmm.
on. And so, but a guy could do it like, 50 times and not be exhausted.
Right. Yep.
So, especially if they're used to chopping wood for their fireplaces.
yeah.
Hmm.
So they have lots of practice. Well, that was very interesting. There's some factoid in there that I never heard of. And yes, and it could be, and also seems like there's mental illness that ran on her father's side of the family.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Mm.
So, but I still don't think it was her.
I don't either.
I think it was someone else, and she was used as a scapegoat. But she wasn't found guilty, but she did live like a recluse the rest of her life, right?
Yes, she did.
Yeah,
Yes.
that sucks because her life was ruined because of that.
Yeah, she was still shunned. And then, the kids, they did say kids would come on her property and sing that rhyme. Um,
Aw,
yeah. So
that's
she never
awful.
seemed to have peace.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, that's awful. I feel bad for her. Well, that was
Mm.
great. Thank you so much, Lizzie. And
You're
thank you
welcome.
so much, Dante. That was lots of interesting information. And until next week, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Bye bye.
Thank you for
Bye.
listening. Bye bye. Join us again next week.